And he was saying, well, I can learn a lot here. And I'm like, dude, I'm not your school. If that's your best story, you should pay me for teaching you. Hi, welcome to Absolute Joy. I'm Michael Joy, and this is a little bit of a business story we have for you today. Now, sometimes when I talk about a story, it doesn't mean that I have a beginning, a middle, and an end, because I haven't always figured it out, but I just think that I'll tell you where I'm at a certain point based on certain factors. This story is about how I interview artists to work with me in my environment. So let me tell you how that's changed over the years. Here we go. So when I first started hiring people to work with me, it was I hired my friend out of art school. Basically, we were collaborators, and I said, hey, we'll split this. So it wasn't really a hiring, it was we were depending on each other to get the job done, and we were sharing the resource. So that's one way, and you don't really have to have interviewing skills there. It's just survive the friendship. Then it migrated later, after years of doing things myself. It was very difficult to hire people because it was always faster to do it myself. I'm like, oh my God, I've had somebody here and they're even asking where a hammer is. I'm like, oh, come on, it's over there. And remember, I was in a very large studio, so I have to have hammers along the way. Because you could pay people a lot to walk around and to find something. I'm like, why are studios rectangular or square? I'm like, I need a studio that's a circle. The work table's in the middle. It's short every which way. I'm like, there needs to be some efficiency and scale. The first time I hired somebody who was capable, it was fantastic. And I only worked with him on Saturdays for a few hours. And I hired this guy to come and kind of help me reset after I worked the week, and Saturdays we would organize the studio. And it was fun. We were bullshitting together, we'd always go out to lunch, get a sandwich, and it just felt amazing to get twice as much done in one day. Someone said, well, it's when you hire your first couple people, that's the biggest change because you see the most dramatic ratio. And that's true. Now, after working with people, I realized I'm gonna need people around me for a lot of different projects. Sometimes I had more people, sometimes I had less people. But when I started working with people, I learned that I'm not good with interns. Interns are for when I had something that was a repetitive task, not custom project. It's too much to throw a kid in, keep them busy. I didn't feel good about that, and I didn't feel good about just having them push a broom all day long either, although it probably would have been valuable for some just to be in that work environment to see. They would have sort of had education by osmosis versus me thinking I had to teach them. But I always cared about the people that were around me, so I slowed down to accommodate them, and I realized this is just expensive for me. Now let's fast forward into my mold making business, Chicago School of Mold Making. At a certain point, we started hiring people. It turned out that I hired people that I felt were good with their hands. I didn't really get involved with their personalities. I thought, oh, this person's nice, or this person can do that. It was very simple criteria. Can you pour the molds? Can you stay clean? Can you stay focused? Can you stay organized? Now, as the job descriptions became more complex, I realized I needed a more sophisticated hiring program. Like, I always felt like I was hiring somebody to help them, meaning a young kid coming out of school. It's like, oh, you'll learn a lot here, kid, come here. That was exactly upside down. I think that's been part of my greatest mistakes in hiring. Why I'm not great at it is I'm too connected to the people that I've worked with. It's changed though. As the business environment around me has become more expensive to operate, I feel less forgiving in my demands of them keeping up. And even to this point, I help a little bit too much, I would have to say, to the point where I was working with some people, and this is recently, there was a couple people working with me, and I went out of my way to do things for them. And I don't know whether they were suffering from personal depression or what. I found pillows in a closet upstairs, and someone had just made their own napping arrangement there. I think I know who it was, and I realized that there's some people that are used to very large work environments where you can hide and become invisible. And there's a certain type of person who wants to give the minimum. Even if they're very, very skilled, they're not psychologically balanced themselves to give their best. There's either always chaos in their life, there's always some other distraction happening, and then I was the shock absorber for that at times, and I was pretty resentful, and at the same time I felt hostage to a person's specific skill set, because as we became more sophisticated in the equipment we were using or the programs we were using, I couldn't do that stuff myself. Now all of a sudden I don't know how to program that, I don't know how to turn that on. They call it the inmates are running the asylum, and that's what was happening. Now it got to the point where Balin and I decided that we will never again be held hostage by any one employee. No matter what their skill set is, we will recover. And that is, to this day, we were so exhausted by accommodating people that were irregular and inconsistent. And it's a tough thing, because a person like that can hit a home run and you're like, oh my God, thank you, you're a genius, you saved the day. But when they crash, or when they don't show up for work, or when they're late, or they got these bullshit excuses. So the way I start interviewing for Westchester is different than I interview for here. The best thing that I've learned from hiring, and I only hire a few people. You know, we haven't had maybe more than 20 or 30 people kind of cycle through my entire hiring career. Other people do that in a month, right? People are disposable and you plug them in, you plug them out. I found that what someone was being hired for is they're coming in looking for work, and they tended to say, yes, I can do this job. And I thought, I'm gonna hear that anyways. So what I would immediately ask is what are your other skills? What are the skills that you have that you're not putting on your resume? Oh, I'm a chess player. Oh, I'm a whatever. And eventually there'd be some discovery that I'm like, oh, here's where it clicked. Here's where you can be somebody else. And then it tells me how that person's gonna move within the company. Now, how they accept responsibility, that's up to them. You know, time will tell. But I'm always looking for people that can do more than one thing. If I got a one-trick pony or a slow walker is somebody who doesn't move with purpose. A slow walker is someone who is thinking about, I don't care what gets done during the day. They clock in, they clock out, and maybe they like to be around the work, or they say they do, but they're not passionate about it. It's hard to make someone passionate about it. And I learned that carrot don't work. You know, I thought that I can bonus people for good performance, but really, if it takes that to keep somebody as a priority, it's just not gonna work, because eventually I can only do what I can do, and the company's the size it is. So there has to be some other investment, some other reason. They're part of the culture. They have to earn a good livable wage. I'm not saying that they should not ask for that, but it can't be the only thing. There's gotta be something else. And I never know what it is for that person. Sometimes it's proximity, sometimes it's like they've been chewed up in the grinder somewhere else. And this is something I learned also. I hired an extraordinary number of people who I was either their first job or their nearly first job. And we had such a unique work environment that they did not appreciate the uniqueness of the environment. And I realized, I'm like, you need to go have a terrible boss, you know? And I would send them back to the universe to get polished. No matter what I would say, there was an entitlement. And I came up with this phrase years ago, and I said, the United States is full of extremists. It's just called entitlement. That's how I felt, is that we had a young man interview the other day, and he was saying, well, I can learn a lot here. And I'm like, dude, I'm not your school. If that's your best story, you should pay me for teaching you, because you've been paying all this time. I said, no, turn it, you remember that. You saw it happen. It's not with venom. It's just like, hey, change the story. I don't care what you're here to learn. That's the hard side of it. I do care. At the front, they need to know that there's a difference. I remember the way my brother handled his young daughter one time, and it just struck me as so orienting. He said this with love. His daughter was being a little bit of and something about my room and my this and my that. He's like, you know, Susan, that's mommy's and daddy's room. We let you use it. And it like reoriented her right away. That childness of being provided for. I remember when I moved out of my dad's house, I lived with him first year in high school. They went out of their way to buy nice furniture and this, that, and the other. And when it didn't work out, I moved out. My stepmom was like, that furniture stays. We bought that. And I was like, what? I had the exact same thing. I was like thinking my own song only. I like to hear people come from a different story. They have all these other experiences already. I still bring in first timers, but I don't know, I'm just a glutton for punishment, I guess. Specific questions I ask in an interview. A lot of the tech people, I have to have a tech next to me. I did learn to have a woman next to me in the interview, because I see certain things and a woman sees other certain things just by nature. So I try to have that type of dynamic in an interview, not for any cause, but just psychically, it's different. They vibe into different things. And especially if I was hiring a girl, I would have another girl. I'm like, did she check out? I mean, what'd you catch there, you know? And there's other people that have a lengthy hiring process where you go through this interview and you go through these things. Well, I did that with a tenant one time. You go through the vetting, you go through the criminal check, and it's still effed up. I'm like, okay, there's gotta be another way. I like trial periods. That to me feels better. And I always say, let's give this 3 months and see how this goes.